Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
And now the papers, as usual. The atmosphere in the Observer newsroom is reaching boiling point. Week after week, they're taking their editorials and putting them in big type on the front page. And here's this week's one. Trump cannot be trusted. He's like nothing that has gone before. Trump is ignorant, prejudiced and vicious in ways that no American leader has been. We know what they think, at least. Trump's fury is global fury as Trump's ban takes effect is their headline, and they have caught Theresa May's overnight statement saying she does not agree with the move. Then there's the statue. Lots of the tabloids are going on the Diana story, perhaps in relief for something lighter to go on. The Sunday Telegraph, rather interestingly, has put the Trump ban story right at the bottom of the front page, rather unimpressed by it. A beautiful photograph of Sir John Hurt and a story about the Troubles inquiry as well. The Sunday Times has a different Trump story. Trump and Prince Charles, they say, in a climate row. When President Trump comes to the UK, he doesn't want to meet Prince Charles because he doesn't want to be lectured about climate change, it says. And they were also following up their Trident story of last week. And then many other things there in the papers. A story about the transgender lobby getting their way in the NHS so that we can't call pregnant patients mothers anymore, it says, it claims. We'll talk about that and much more. But first of all, Sir Christopher Marr, a man who has seen the Anglo-American relationship up close during the Blair-Bush years in Washington. Chris, what do you make of the coverage and what do you make of Theresa May's demeanour?
Well, I think the coverage has been pretty good for her. And if I was sitting in Downing Street, I would be very pleased with the way the story has been written up. She had a very narrow tightrope to walk to make this visit successful to Washington, and I think she walked it pretty well. She was able to invest some new meanings, some new substance in the schmaltzy old concept of a special relationship.
So she got warm words on trade and the special relationship and on NATO, which is very important for her.
No, she got some wins. NATO was a big win. To have Donald Trump say he was 100% behind the organisation means it's less toxic about trying to improve relationships with Putin. The thing that was really dangerous was Trump was being nasty about NATO, but nice about Putin.
And you've got the Observer, which I mentioned. Also, the Sunday Times gives Theresa May some good coverage, in your view.
Yeah, the Sunday Times gives very, very good coverage indeed, because the way it is seen is that she has been extremely, extremely clever, not only in the way she dealt with Trump, but in her speech to the Republican convention the night before, which laid out her prospectus, a lot of which was very critical of Trump.
Right, and I think I'll let you hunt for it. I think you've got the New York Times on your iPad at some point, Sir Christopher, because they have picked up the overnight story about Theresa May finally saying that she's against this ban on Muslim countries.
Well, I mean, I think what this shows is if you're Theresa May, you've got to realise you're going to get surprises out of Donald Trump. You may think you've got your fixes in during the visit, but then, suddenly when you're in Turkey, bam, up comes this thing
absolutely.
About...
And she was slightly caught off guard. Amanda, you've got a splash in the Mail on Sunday.
Yes, this is, I mean, 7 months ago, Andrew, when Brexit happened, if you told me that Prime Minister Theresa May would be having her hand squeezed by President Donald Trump, I would have said you were barking. And there it is for us all to see. And the most extraordinary, as you say, Christopher, just an extraordinary speech, surprised a lot of people who really didn't think she had it in her. And she has got extraordinary support. And this is a new word for us, Yanis. He is the only person I know who knows what it means before the papers.
Well, it's actually a very apt term for one of his ailments. One of his ailments. Bathmophobia, bathmos comes from the word for gradient.
The Greek word for gradient.
Gradualism. So that he has a fear of gradualism is extremely apt for this particular man.
And it's the fear of going downstairs or ramps. It makes it sound a
slopes.
bit like
fear
a
of slopes, of gradients.
When you watch him coming down...
And this is relevant because this is allegedly, according to the White House, why he grabbed Theresa May by the hand. He wanted help going downstairs.
He's just a bit too tactile, isn't he? And my great fear is that when he comes over for this great royal visit, he's going to grab the Queen's hand. My Lord, what will happen then?
But all the Queen has to do is avoid staircases and gradients. Because I mean, I don't know which is better. Does he grab Theresa out of affection? and the special relationship? Or does he grab her because he feels he's going to fall over? I think the latter's better.
But Christopher, it's too intimate. You know, it's
said,
shaking
but
someone.
it's only tiny.
They're like lovers.
That's probably the only real thing about the special relationship.
Let's
They look like lovers.
Too much hands. Too much hands.
Too many hands. Let's move
let
on,
me
if
tell
we
you-
may. Which of the papers managed to get the Theresa May overnight statement? Because that was a big story. It came quite late.
The late statement, the only one I saw was The Observer. It might have been changed up in some of the earlier editions. But just going back, Andrew, to the thing you were saying about the support for the papers, Tony Parsons, famous author, famous columnist, lifelong Labour supporter, he's done his whole column in The Sun saying why we should all be glad, oath, Trump is in the White House. But it's actually very supportive. It's saying we've got to do deals with this man. It may be an extraordinary new beginning for us. I would never have expected that. But even more astonishingly is that the Labour supporting Sunday Mirror says of Theresa, hand it to May, date went well. You know, she's just on a roll, this woman, at the moment.
Absolutely. And her we all saw that awkward moment in the Turkish press conference where she was asked 3 times whether she supported the Muslim ban.
She's so cautious, isn't she? You know, you've interviewed her. We both know her. Her default position is caution, go and check, and then come
and
make
just to
a right
remind people,
afterwards.
the statement overnight said that she did not support the ban,
Yes.
and we would have a different policy. But it was very calmly and quietly expressed, if I could put it that way. And of course, Yanis, all of these negotiations flying around the place are about hard business deals.
Indeed.
And you've taken a story from the Observer again about the £100 million fighter jet deal. The Turks are going to build their own fighter jets, but they're actually going to be made in the UK.
Well, I think the most astonishing part about this story is the very low price. 100 million is nothing. To sell your soul, sell your soul to the devil if you wish, but sell it at a good price. This is.
Do you regard Erdogan as the devil?
Well, I regard the Turkish regime to be particularly and increasingly nasty. The fact that you have special police forces entering the editorial offices of newspapers and driving at gunpoint journalists out to change the headlines of the next morning is something that you should be very worried about.
It's not usual that people are concerned about journalists, I have to say.
So
it's nice to hear.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if we allow for something like this to happen while business proceeds as if it is as usual, then we are all going to be doing a great deal of harm to our own societies.
Before we leave this story, a question for you all. It has been said that after Brexit, Britain so badly needs to do deals with other countries around the world that we can no longer, as it were, speak plainly. We have to be a bit mealy-mouthed when it comes to people like Donald Trump or President Erdogan, or in due course the Saudis and the Chinese as well. Is there anything in this, do we think? There's a photograph to that effect, Gone with the Wind, not a photograph, a cartoon.
The cartoons are brilliant.
Sorry, no, you go.
No, you go. And no holding hands.
I think what Theresa May is doing, which is, I think, typical of her, is taking an extremely pragmatic, transactional attitude towards British foreign policy. There are things we need to do, and we cannot afford the luxury of interfering in other people's internal affairs by stating whether we approve or disapprove on human rights grounds or other grounds, ethical grounds, on things that they are doing. She has said she disagrees with what Donald Trump is doing, but more particularly, given your Nadim Zahawi, who's coming on later on, she has said that we're British dual nationals are going to be affected by this Trump executive order. Britain has got to stand up for them.
Because it says on the
that's right thing
passport,
to say.
it says that they'll stand up for everybody on the passport. You have to do that. Yanis, you've also picked up the Labour rebellion coming this week from the Observer, I think, in the House of Commons. We have the Article 50 legislation now required by the court in the House of Commons, and Labour MPs are trying to amend it, some of them to try and stop us triggering Article 50.
Well, for the benefit of full disclosure, I campaigned in this country against Brexit. But having said that, Article 50 must be activated. It must be supported by anyone who believes in democracy. When we fought this referendum, we lost our side of politics, and we have to accept it. And the question now has to, the focus has to fall on the interim agreement. If Labour MPs are serious about maintaining all the essence that is substantial and significant regarding the relationship between this country and the European Union, this is what they should be focusing on, not the triggering of Article 50. How can you say to the people in Northern England that, you voted, we're going to disregard, we're going to do to you what Brussels did to the Irish? Because remember, with the Lisbon Treaty, the Irish voted against, and then they were asked to vote once more until they get it right. So
you have
they
to
are
respect
very wrong to be
democracy,
doing
but
this.
then get the best deal you can.
What they should be focusing on is the fact that there is no mandate from the referendum for ending freedom of movement, for ending the customs union. This is all stuff that should be discussed.
There was an implied mandate.
No, there was no implied mandate. This is your view, but the Labour side should argue against your view.
Only for the freedom of movement, I'm saying.
Allow me to say that the strongest argument for Brexit, from where I'm sitting, is restoring national sovereignty to the House of Commons. Well, restore it. Say that the next House of Commons, which will be fought in an election that will give a mandate to members of parliament to have this discussion, will decide what the interim agreement will be, or what comes after the interim agreement. But to say that the 23rd of June has already settled the issue, that freedom of movement is no longer an issue that has been settled, that is something that does not ooze out of the 23rd of June. You may claim that it does, but it doesn't.
I don't think Theresa May's in any hurry to have a snap election.
Let's move on to the Daily Telegraph, however.
Yeah, the Telegraph's got
Tom Watson.
Tom Watson, this is extraordinary. I mean, we've seen 2 more shadow cabinet members resign at the end of last week, over the weekend. And Tom Watson is saying, don't worry, if you resign from the shadow cabinet or from a shadow job at all, we'll have you back in a few months' time. And it's just extraordinary. He says, so you're a rebel with a cause, and then when you don't have the cause, then you come straight back in again. But that's because they've got so few people that'll sit in Jeremy's shadow cabinet anyway.
It's quite a story. Christopher Mayer, another big story. Jackie Kennedy in the Telegraph. Everyone's going to be watching this film over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a big story, but it's a sweet story, and it coincides very nicely with the appearance of this film called Jackie. It reveals that after the assassination of JFK, his widow, Jackie Kennedy, decided that she would not accept the offer of marriage by the then British ambassador, Lord Harlech, David Ormsby Gore, something which did not involve me during my tenure in Washington. And she wrote him a very, very sweet but slightly mysterious card in response to this offer of marriage, saying, I wish I could give you the most precious thing that belonged to him, JFK, as precious as your friendship was to him. But nothing tangible could ever express that. So please accept this with all my love. Jackie, that was a book of poems by Shelley. But I just think it brings a bit of humanity to the craft of diplomacy, would you not think? And the Daily Telegraph.
You had no billet doux of that nature from the White House.
No, I never got any kind of message billet doux like that from the White House. From anyone, and now I've read this, I think I missed something, you know?
Absolutely.
Don't you think?
But then,
Amanda, sorry, before we have to keep cracking on, because the other story is the Diana statue.
Yes.
Almost all the tabloids have this across the front page. Paper after paper after paper talks about it. We'll have photographs, and it's William and Harry. This is a big year for them, of course.
It is, and the thing, it
mother.
is very important, and it appears as though they're going to get very highly involved in celebrating her the anniversary of her death. And it is, you know, for those people who liked or loved or respected Diana, that horrible drain in Hyde Park, which looks like an old reticulation system, was a discourtesy and a disservice to her memory. And I'm glad they're doing it. And lots of people love it.
Yanis, you've disposed of your monarchy, of course.
We sent them to you.
You sent them to me. And we read also this morning that Donald Trump doesn't want Prince Charles to greet him if he comes over here for a state visit, because Prince Charles will give him a lecture, an earwigging on climate change.
Well, I think the government should give him a lecture on climate change. This is perhaps, from a planetary perspective, the most significant topic, and he's a real menace when it comes to that. Undoing the Paris Accords would be a major blow to humanity's prospects.
Well, humanity's prospects sorted for now. Thank you both all very much indeed.
Let's take a look now at some of the front pages this morning. The Observer leads with the global backlash against Donald Trump's executive order barring citizens from 7 mainly Muslim countries entering the US. The president's also in a diplomatic row with Prince Charles over climate change, according to the Sunday Times. The Sunday Telegraph says the government submitted the system for investigating murders in Northern Ireland during the Troubles is not working. The Mail on Sunday headline attacks what it claims is an NHS directive not to call pregnant patients mothers in case it offends transgender people. The Sunday Express front page reports on plans to unveil a memorial statue of Princess Diana to mark the 20th anniversary of her death. Well, to take a look at these stories and more, we're now joined by the constructive business owner, Julie White, the political editor of The Sun, Tom Newton-Dunn, and the former Labour advisor, Ayesha Hazarika. Thanks for being with us.
Morning.
Morning.
Hello. Morning.
Tom, I think we've got to talk first about this slightly alarming photograph. in the sun, or this mocked-up image.
It is disturbing, isn't
Dawn
it?
with a
There's no
wind.
two other ways for it.
I'm not sure I'm ever going to be able to get this image up my head now.
So this here, clearly this is our graphic artist's brilliant illustration of the quite extraordinary love-in going on in the White House just after the press conference that we all saw on Friday, the trip that I was on following the Prime Minister around. And really it's a parable of what happens when you walk the Donald Trump high-wire trapeze act, which Theresa May has to do. Yesterday, we got onto Turkey and Downing Street were tickled pink with how well the bonding session had gone and were busy telling us incredible details from this lunch, such as the story that we went in on. Donald Trump wants to be his relationship with Theresa May to even better than Maggie and Ron, which is the absolute high mark of US-UK post-Second World War special relations. And he kept the name card from the lunch. He gave it to an aide and said, keep this forever. This is a special souvenir. I just had lunch with the British Prime Minister. He told Theresa May he wants to see her first when he gets off the plane for the big state visit.
But there's risks to this, aren't there, as well?
So then what happens is, suddenly, overnight, we realise that the degree of the seriousness of his refugee policy and the crisis that's emerging, and suddenly this great big love-in and cozying up to the US president, which she has to do to get influence over him, suddenly looks like a really terrible idea.
I think a lot of people will actually have had their stomachs turned by the kind of cozying up of Theresa May to Donald Trump. This guy is misogynistic, he's xenophobic, he's banned Muslim refugees on the day of like the Holocaust Memorial, like Remembrance Day. This is guy, look, I know we have to get a trade deal, but we're also a country and a tradition that prides ourselves on our values. And our values are about equality and inclusion. And so I think yes, we want a trade deal, but we don't want to be so desperate that we are scared to call bad behaviour out when we see it.
But don't you think also with Donald Trump, it's just a U-turn? I mean, he was doing this all the way through before the election, during the election, and now after. I mean, usual...
Theresa May, she is on the horns of an appalling dilemma because she absolutely has to try and get influence over this narcissistic, gut instinct-driven, strange man who just isn't a politician by the normal rules of the book. Issues like NATO confronting Putin are massive global influence, so she has to be nice to him. She has to seem to be nice to him.
But they usually say
it's a very, very careful line.
Usually they say with presidents they keep low for the first 100 days, and what has he done in 100 hours? It's amazing.
I quite like that story that we picked up as well on the Mail of Sunday.
Yes, I hope I say the word right.
Bathmophobia.
Yeah, bathmophobia. Yeah, we were saying that probably loads of people have Googled that all morning. It's probably been...
We discovered it in the...
Explain what is
well, it is the actual fear of falling, of downstairs, of down slopes. So they say the hand-holding of Theresa May and Trump wasn't because it was supposed to be friendly and, it was because he was frightened of falling.
So I have to say, I'm very cynical about this. I have a phobia, it's called Trumpophobia.
Yeah,
and it's a phobia of kind of racist, misogynistic, quite scary men. Here all week, tell your friends.
They also say he's got a phobia of germs as well. So why don't we take him to some stairs in some back area and, and then do the trade deal there?
See, I think Number 10 have briefed this because they know that that photo is going to kind of hang, from a PR point of view, it's going to hang around their neck like a sort of bad albatross. So I think they've slightly briefed that in. I mean, look, he may well...
didn't brief. I was there, and unfortunately, they didn't brief it. We were desperate for a line on what on earth was this hand-holding all about. What were you thinking, Number 10? What were you thinking, Theresa? It's all too close. And then this was the chat we were picking up in Washington, D.C. from the wider government circles. I think actually Number 10 was slightly embarrassed about the hand-holding. They didn't really know how to handle
it. Trumps haven't come back with a briefing about it, so do you not think it's gone...
Well, interestingly... Well, no.
News
but interestingly, it says here that the notoriously thick-skinned Trump is unlikely to welcome the idea that he had to clutch someone's hand because it makes him look weak. And also, because he's got very small fingers, they don't like to talk about his hands. Apparently.
I don't know what this means. There's a greater significance there. I'm sure you could probably explain.
Let's move quickly on that moment and talk about this story about Labour and Brexit. A split party fears Corbyn has not found the answer. This is in The Observer. And Article 50 in Brexit does pose a bit of a problem, doesn't it, Ayesha?
It's a huge issue for the Labour Party, and there is a massive split on it. And I have to say, look, I've been very critical of Corbyn where I felt it was appropriate, but I think he's in a really difficult position here. The majority of Labour members voted to remain. There was a big democratic exercise and we lost the vote. So we are leaving the EU, even though people like myself and lots of people in the Labour Party don't like the result. So I think he's actually doing the right thing by saying, look, we can't stop Article 50 being triggered. We are Democrats, but let's put amendments down. Let's make sure that we kind of try and shape the deal in the best way with our values and for our constituents and looking at the economy and jobs. But the Labour Party's in a real bind about this because the problem for Corbyn putting a 3-line whip is that this is a guy who made a name for himself constantly rebelling.
More than 400 times.
Exactly. So that's why it's sort of a bit meaningless. But I think actually his position is a kind of understandable position.
You think not the Trump of the Labour Party?
Well, the difference, Trump was very popular and successful before he became... I mean, that is true. I mean, he had like a show. But the big test for this, of course, is the 2 big by-elections coming up, Stoke and Copeland, and they voted to leave.
OK, have to leave it there. Thanks very much for all your thoughts on the busy news week that there's been.
I've been getting away with it all.